Iran, Israel and the United States. Regime security versus political legitimacy. Introduction. The book begins by framing the central dilemma facing the three countries, Iran, Israel, and the United States, as a balancing act between regime security and political legitimacy. Each nation grapples with external threats while seeking internal acceptance and validation. 1. The triangular tension. Iran uses external adversaries, notably Israel and the US, to justify internal repression and maintain control. The regime portrays itself as the indispensable guardian against foreign threats. Israel emphasizes Iran as an existential danger, which supports its security policies and strengthens its domestic political standing. The United States plays a dual role, as a military ally to Israel and a fluctuating partner or opponent to Iran, mediating tensions but also responding to Iran's nuclear and regional ambitions. The introduction highlights how mutual perceptions of existential threat reinforce each regime's authority and amplify regional entanglements. 2. Historical context. Covering several decades, the authors trace shifts from mounting tension pre-1979 to outright hostility following Iran's Islamic Revolution. Israel's long-standing concerns about Iran's nuclear program and its support for proxy groups like Hezbollah. The evolving U.S. relationship, with support under the Shah, estrangement after the revolution, and periodic cooperation or confrontation depending on the administration. This historical backdrop reveals the cyclical nature of security and legitimacy crises. 3. Proxy networks and regional strategies. Proxy groups emerge as pivotal tools. Iran leverages armed organizations, Hezbollah, militias in Iraq, to project power and compensate for conventional vulnerabilities. These networks pose critical threats to Israel, altering strategic calculations without direct confrontation. The United States fluctuates between containment policies, sanctions, and direct military action depending on crises and regime behavior. The introduction showcases how proxy warfare complicates direct diplomacy and heightens fragility. 4. Nuclear ambiguity and its fallout. Iran's nuclear program is portrayed as both a deterrent and propaganda tool. Israel treats it as a red line threatening its existence. Iran views nuclear capability as leverage, domestically and internationally. Washington, meanwhile, is divided. Some see negotiation as viable, others, like hardliners, favor confronting Iran militarily. This ambiguity intensifies insecurity and drives rival strategies. 5. U.S. as mediator and actor. The U.S. is presented as a strategic double agent. As Israel's ally, it provides military aid and supports deterrence against Iran. As a mediator, it has occasionally engaged Iran diplomatically, as seen in the JCPOA era. Domestic U.S. politics often reflect Israel's security concerns and Iran's internal repression, influencing U.S. policy posture. The introduction argues that American actions and rhetoric deeply affect the balance between regime survival and legitimacy for both states. 6. Policy alternatives and the stakes ahead. Roshandel and Lean close the introduction by highlighting that security-oriented tactics, military intervention, sanctions, covert action can undermine domestic legitimacy. Legitimacy-focused reforms, democratization, inclusion, transparency could strengthen a regime's internal cohesion, but may weaken its willingness to project power externally. The challenge, for policymakers, lies in navigating this paradox: how to maintain safety without eroding the internal faith that supports it. In essence, the introduction sets the stage for the book's exploration of how regime survival and credibility are mutually reinforcing, yet often in tension, especially within the volatile triangle of Iran, Israel, and the United States. Chapter 1. Iranian Politics, Domestic Issues and International Relationships. 1. Regime security versus political legitimacy. The Iranian regime prioritizes its survival over political legitimacy. Central power lies with the supreme leader, backed by institutions like the Revolutionary Guard and intelligence services, which suppress dissent and ensure continuity of the Islamic system. Despite public unrest, the regime maintains tight control. 2. Economic challenges and public discontent. Iran faces severe economic challenges including inflation, unemployment, and poverty. These problems have been worsened by sanctions and government mismanagement. As a result, public frustration has grown, leading to widespread protests and increasing pressure on the regime from within. 3. Internal factionalism. Iranian politics is marked by tension between reformists and hardliners. While reformists advocate for openness and diplomacy, hardliners dominate the system through institutions that limit reformist influence. Elections are often tightly controlled, and moderate voices are marginalized. 4. Using external threats to build unity. The regime frequently uses anti-Western and anti-Israeli rhetoric to foster national unity and justify internal repression. By portraying Iran as a victim of foreign aggression, the government seeks to deflect attention from domestic failings and consolidate support. 5. Proxy networks and regional strategy. Iran uses proxy groups like Hezbollah to extend its influence across the region. This strategy serves both foreign policy goals and internal propaganda. However, it often comes at the expense of domestic resources, leading to resentment among citizens who feel their needs are ignored. 6. Foreign policy is a tool of regime survival. Foreign relations are closely tied to internal politics. Military actions and diplomatic decisions are often timed to strengthen the regime's position at home. Negotiations with foreign powers are treated with suspicion, especially by hardliners who equate compromise with weakness. 7. Repression of dissent. The Iranian government restricts political freedoms, press rights, and social liberties to maintain control. Protests are often met with crackdowns, and security forces play a major role in enforcing regime stability. Human rights concerns remain a key issue in Iran's internal politics. 8. Crisis of legitimacy. Public trust in the government has eroded due to poor governance, corruption, and repeated crises. Although the regime still has supporters, especially among conservative and rural populations, many Iranians, particularly youth and urban dwellers, are increasingly disillusioned. 9. Limits on reform. While some leaders have advocated for gradual change, the political structure severely limits meaningful reform. Any attempt to liberalize risks undermining the power of hardliners, who resist change and use national security concerns to justify repression. 10. Relationship with the U.S. Iran's relationship with the United States is both adversarial and central to its internal narrative. Hostility toward the U.S. helps justify the regime's control and security measures. Periods of diplomatic engagement, such as the nuclear deal, expose deep divides within the Iranian leadership. Conclusion of this chapter. This chapter portrays Iran as a regime that prioritizes security and survival over popular legitimacy. Domestic unrest, economic hardship, and political repression are balanced by a strategy of external confrontation and internal control. The result is a fragile but enduring political system shaped by both internal divisions and external pressures. Chapter 2. Israel, Politics and People. 1. Democratic but divided. Israel is a strong democracy with free elections, vibrant civil society, and political pluralism. However, it is deeply divided along ideological, ethnic, and religious lines. 2. Security is a top priority. Israel's politics are shaped by constant security concerns. Threats from Iran, Hezbollah, and other groups drive defense policies and public opinion, often influencing election outcomes. 3. Military and society. Military service is central to Israeli identity and politics. The Israel Defense Forces (IDF) play a powerful role in shaping national unity and political discourse. 4. Coalition politics. The Israeli political system relies on coalition governments, often leading to unstable alliances and policy compromises. This adds complexity to decision-making on national issues. 5. Diverse society. Israel's population includes Jews of various backgrounds, Arabs, Druze, and other minorities. While the country is democratic, tensions exist over identity, rights, and national belonging. 6. Iran is a unifying threat. Despite internal differences, Iranian aggression and its nuclear ambitions are seen as a shared threat, bringing together most of the political spectrum on defense-related policies. Conclusion of this chapter. Israel's political system is open and democratic but faces challenges from internal divisions and constant external threats. National security, especially concerning Iran, remains a central unifying issue. Chapter 3. Regional politics and proxy groups. 1. The Middle East is a strategic chessboard. This chapter explores how regional politics in the Middle East are shaped by deep-seated rivalries, shifting alliances, and power struggles, especially between Iran and Israel. These two states see each other as existential threats and compete for influence across the region. 2. Iran's proxy strategy. Iran uses a network of non-state actors, such as Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Houthis in Yemen, and militias in Iraq and Syria, to project power. These groups serve as tools for Iran to counterbalance Israel and the U.S. without engaging in direct conflict. 3. Israel's regional strategy. Israel focuses on countering Iran's proxies through targeted strikes, particularly in Syria and Lebanon, intelligence operations, and forming strategic partnerships with Arab states that also view Iran as a threat. 4. Proxy conflict over direct war. Rather than fighting directly, Iran and Israel operate through intermediaries. This indirect warfare allows both to avoid full-scale war while still challenging each other militarily and politically. 5. Impact on U.S. policy. The U.S. plays a balancing role in the region, supporting Israel, confronting Iran, and sometimes trying to prevent escalation. American policy often responds to how proxy groups are used in broader strategic goals by Iran. Conclusion of this chapter. Regional dynamics in the Middle East are shaped by Iran's proxy network and Israel's countermeasures. This ongoing struggle contributes to instability and influences broader U.S. involvement in the region. Chapter 4. Nuclear dynamics, potential threats and consequences. 1. The strategic role of nuclear weapons. The chapter discusses how nuclear weapons are viewed as crucial for national security, deterrence, and regional dominance, especially for Iran and Israel, two nations with deep-seated mutual distrust and differing nuclear postures. 2. Iran's nuclear ambitions. Iran insists its nuclear program is for peaceful purposes, but the opacity around its activities raises fears among Israel and Western countries that it seeks nuclear weapons capability. The chapter explores how Iran's pursuit is linked to regime survival and international leverage. 3. Israel's ambiguous nuclear doctrine. Israel maintains a policy of nuclear opacity, neither confirming nor denying its nuclear arsenal. This ambiguity is meant to deter regional adversaries while avoiding direct provocation or international pressure. 4. The threat of escalation. If Iran were to develop nuclear weapons, it could trigger a regional arms race, increase the likelihood of preemptive strikes by Israel, and destabilize the already fragile Middle East. The chapter outlines potential war scenarios and diplomatic breakdowns. 5. U.S. involvement and deterrence strategy. The United States plays a key role in trying to contain nuclear tensions, using diplomacy, e.g., the Iran nuclear deal, and deterrence strategies to prevent escalation and reassure allies like Israel. Conclusion of this chapter. The nuclear rivalry between Iran and Israel presents one of the most dangerous threats to regional and global stability. Without trust or diplomatic progress, the risk of miscalculation or conflict remains high. Chapter 5. Recent conflicts. 1. Overview of recent tensions. The chapter explores key flashpoints and military confrontations between Iran, Israel, and U.S. interests in the Middle East. It highlights how these conflicts reflect broader ideological, political, and security rivalries. 2. Syria and the proxy battlefield. Syria emerges as a major arena for indirect conflict. Iran supports the Assad regime and deploys IRGC and Hezbollah forces, while Israel conducts frequent airstrikes to prevent Iranian entrenchment and weapons transfers to Hezbollah. 3. Iraq and Iran's expanding influence. Iran has deepened its influence in Iraq through Shia militias and political networks. U.S. and Israeli concerns focus on Iran's ability to launch attacks from Iraqi territory, especially via its proxy groups. 4. Gaza and Lebanon, Iran's armed proxies. Iran-backed Hamas in Gaza and Hezbollah in Lebanon remain active threats to Israel. Rocket attacks, border skirmishes, and drone warfare continue to provoke Israeli military responses, keeping the region in a cycle of retaliation. 5. Cyber warfare and covert operations. Beyond traditional warfare, cyberattacks and espionage have escalated. Israel and Iran have both used cyber tools to sabotage infrastructure, with incidents like the Stuxnet virus and attacks on nuclear and water facilities. Conclusion of this chapter. Recent conflicts show how the Iran-Israel-US triangle plays out across multiple fronts, physical and digital. These confrontations highlight the fragile balance of deterrence, and the potential for a larger war if tensions spiral out of control. Chapter 6. Iran and the United States. This chapter focuses on the long and complex relationship between Iran and the United States, emphasizing how their foreign policies are shaped by deep-seated mistrust, ideological opposition, and concerns over regime security and legitimacy. 1. Historical foundations of mistrust. The roots of the conflict trace back to the 1953 CIA-backed coup that overthrew Iran's Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh and reinstalled the Shah. This event left a lasting scar in Iran's political memory, reinforcing the belief that the U.S. interferes in other nations to protect its own interests and control natural resources. The 1979 Islamic Revolution in the U.S. Embassy hostage crisis were pivotal moments, ending formal diplomatic relations and turning the U.S. into Iran's Great Satan in official rhetoric. These events established a cycle of hostility and suspicion that persists to this day. 2. U.S. policy toward Iran, containment and pressure. Since 1979, the U.S. has pursued a policy of containment toward Iran, including economic sanctions, diplomatic isolation, and military presence in the Gulf. The chapter details various American administrations' approaches. O. Clinton and Bush emphasized isolation and labeled Iran as part of the axis of evil. O. Obama pursued diplomacy, leading to the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action (JCPOA) or Iran nuclear deal in 2015. O. Trump withdrew from the JCPOA in 2018 and reinstated harsh sanctions under the maximum pressure campaign. These shifts created a pattern of policy inconsistency, reinforcing Iranian mistrust of U.S. intentions. 3. Iran's perception of the U.S. Iranian leaders perceive the U.S. as a threat to regime survival, not just a geopolitical rival. The U.S. is seen as promoting Western cultural imperialism, supporting regime change, and undermining Islamic governance. Iran uses this perceived threat to justify its domestic repression and foreign policy aggression, including support for regional proxies. 4. The nuclear issue is a flashpoint. Iran's nuclear program is a central issue in U.S.-Iran relations. The chapter examines how Iran insists its program is for peaceful energy purposes. The U.S. and its allies fear Iran's potential to build nuclear weapons. The JCPOA temporarily eased tensions, but the U.S. withdrawal in 2018 reignited hostilities. The nuclear issue is also symbolic, representing Iran's desire for sovereignty and U.S. efforts to control global order. 5. Proxy conflict and asymmetric warfare. The U.S. and Iran rarely confront each other directly, instead, they fight through proxies in Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and Yemen. Iran funds and arms groups like Hezbollah, the Houthis, and various Iraqi militias. The U.S. responds with targeted strikes, sanctions, and support for anti-Iran allies like Israel and Saudi Arabia. This asymmetric war increases regional instability and raises the risk of escalation. 6. Public opinion and domestic politics. In both countries, domestic politics influence foreign policy. Iranian leaders use anti-American rhetoric to legitimize their rule and distract from internal problems. U.S. politicians often use Iran as a political tool, with strong lobbying from pro-Israel groups and defense establishments pushing for tough policies. This politicization makes constructive diplomacy more difficult. 7. Strategic miscalculations and missed opportunities. The chapter outlines several moments where both sides misjudged the other. Iran underestimated the backlash to its regional aggression. The U.S. misread internal Iranian dynamics and overestimated the impact of sanctions on changing regime behavior. These errors prolonged conflict and weakened moderate voices in both nations. Conclusion of this chapter. The Iran-U.S. relationship is defined by historical trauma, ideological opposition, and strategic rivalry. Both nations view each other through the lens of regime survival and national identity, leading to mutual suspicion and recurring conflict. While diplomacy has made brief gains, deep mistrust and conflicting worldviews continue to block sustainable progress. The chapter ends by emphasizing that mutual understanding of each other's insecurities, especially regarding regime security, is essential for breaking the cycle of hostility. Conclusion. Navigating the triangular tensions. The conclusion of the book brings together the central arguments and thematic threads explored across the previous chapters. It emphasizes that the complex and volatile relationship between Iran, Israel, and the United States cannot be reduced to isolated political disagreements or historical grievances. Instead, it must be understood through the lens of regime security, political legitimacy, and the existential fears that drive each nation's behavior. 1. Regime security is a driving force. The book underscores that both Iran and Israel perceive threats not only to their physical security but to the survival of their governing systems. For Iran, particularly the Islamic Republic, regime security is paramount. Its leadership believes that external actors, especially the US and Israel, seek to undermine or overthrow the regime. This belief influences Iran's foreign and domestic policies, including suppression of internal dissent, expansion of influence through proxy groups, the pursuit of nuclear capabilities as a deterrent. Israel, in turn, views Iran's actions, especially its nuclear ambitions and support for Hezbollah and other militant groups, as a direct existential threat to the Jewish state's survival. The ideological and religious tone of Iranian rhetoric reinforces this perception. 2. The United States is a strategic actor. The U.S. is portrayed as both a global power and a player with deeply invested regional interests. Its policies toward Iran oscillate between diplomacy, like the JCPOA, and coercion, through sanctions and military presence. The book concludes that American involvement is often shaped more by domestic political considerations and alliances, especially with Israel and the Gulf states, than by a coherent regional strategy. This lack of consistency has made trust building nearly impossible. Iran views U.S. policies as hypocritical and hostile, while Israel depends on unwavering American support to maintain its regional security posture. 3. Political legitimacy and identity politics. The book highlights how internal legitimacy is tied to foreign policy behavior. Iranian leaders use anti-Israel and anti-American rhetoric to bolster their legitimacy among hardliners and within the broader Shia political sphere. Similarly, Israeli leaders often rally domestic political support through national security narratives centered on Iran. In both countries, foreign threats are often used to justify internal control, ideological rigidity, and military spending, complicating efforts toward de-escalation or compromise. 4. Obstacles to resolution. The conclusion points to several structural challenges that hinder peace or long-term stability. Ideological rigidity on both sides, especially around Israel's right to exist and Iran's revolutionary values. Proxy conflicts that serve as flashpoints, allowing both Iran and Israel to engage indirectly. Distrust of diplomatic frameworks, with each side fearing that compromise could be exploited by the other. Even when diplomatic efforts, such as the nuclear deal, seem promising, they are often undermined by leadership changes, domestic politics, or external shocks. 5. The Way Forward: Pragmatism and Realism. The book closes with a cautious recommendation. While ideological and security concerns will persist, a shift toward pragmatic, interest-based diplomacy is essential. Trust-building measures, confidence-enhancing strategies like arms control agreements, and recognition of mutual fears could open the door to reduced tensions. However, the author notes that any sustainable peace requires all parties, especially the U.S., to move beyond short-term political gains and engage in long-term strategy grounded in regional realities. Final takeaway: the triangular relationship between Iran, Israel, and the United States is not merely a clash of nations, but a struggle between competing narratives of identity, legitimacy, and survival. Lasting peace or even stable deterrence will only emerge when each actor acknowledges the core insecurities of the others and refrains from pursuing zero-sum outcomes.